Alright, here is a very quick video, I hope, on just using the spreadsheet to calculate our various statistics that we have. And actually, as I'm looking at it, I suppose I can think of a couple more in here with the median, the quartiles, and so forth, but we'll get to those. So here I have 20 data items, and I've put them in order. I've sorted them just so when we look at the mean and so forth, we can see that it seems to be doing what we would expect it to do, or may expect it to do. The 20 numbers, smallest is 2, the largest is 10. We take the average, and so if we want the sample mean, we actually have to say equals average, and then it goes from A1 to A20, and we get 6. Now, I'm going to go in here, and I'm going to get rid of that for a moment just to show if I'm doing this, what I usually do is I'll say equals. I don't worry about uppercase. I just use lowercase and say average. And usually there's some helper stuff up here telling me what it might do. I do the open parenthesis and it tells me what I need in there, and I need a bunch of numbers. Now, in this case, I know this goes from A1 to A20, and I could type, I could just say A1 colon A20 and close the parenthesis. But actually what I usually do is I go over here and I highlight what I want. So I just go in the middle and I click with a left click, and I drag down until I get to the bottom, and you see that made the A1 to the A20, and then I do the closing parenthesis. And the reason I do that is then I know it's got the right numbers in it. If I have a lot of numbers involved or a very long list and I think I know what it is, I may type something wrong here, I may put a wrong letter in, and it still may calculate something, but then it gives me a wrong answer. So I do that and I hit enter and I get my 6. So that's average. Is the spreadsheet command for a mean or a sample mean or a sample average. Now, with variance and standard deviation, the sample variance, which is pretty much, we want these two things, the sample variance or the sample standard deviation. Rarely in our class do we want the population variance or the population standard deviation. So they are slightly different commands. So sample variance is maybe what you might expect it to be. VAR, just short for variance, VAR. And then again, open parenthesis, and I highlight the values I need and close that off, hit enter, and I get my sample variance here of 7.36. Sample standard deviation, that's STDEV, so standard deviation, again from A1 to A20, and that's just the square root of the variance. So if I go over here and I say, well, equals square root, and I want the square root of that number, hopefully that will turn out to be 2.7 something, and there we go, 2.71448. Okay, now population variance and population standard deviation, those are calculated just slightly differently. It's in our text, and notice they are slightly smaller numbers. Now the standard deviation is still the square root of the variance, or the variance is the square of the standard deviation, but slightly different numbers. And the difference is simply in the formula. When I add up all the squares of the differences in this formula up here, I'm dividing by n minus 1, whereas here I'm dividing by n. And so what that means, if I take that number and I multiply it by 20 and divide it by 19, so multiply it by n, divide it by n minus 1, I should get that number. And just to check, so I'll take that number, 7, times 20 divided by 19. And hopefully I'll get 7.368. Yeah, and see, there we have it. And so that's how those numbers are related. For a sample, you want the sample standard deviation. You know, if we consider these numbers here a sample, then doing a population variance or a population standard deviation would be a bad idea anyway. And so these, you know, they're the simpler name in that they don't have the P with them, and so they're kind of the go-to items, and most people, if they want a variance or a standard deviation, they want it of a sample they've just taken, and so they should use those formulas. But for completeness, I wanted to toss those in just to show you they were there. Now the median, right, that's the middle, and so if I were to go down here, 10 numbers, this half ends in with the 6, that's a 6, so you know, when I find that median, the average of the two middle numbers there, I do get 6, so that's fine. Now here's where, you know, the spreadsheet versus how I might do it by hand are a little bit different. So if I wanted to find the first quartile, or in other words, if I want to find the interquartile range, I need to find the median of these 10 numbers. Well, you see, if I were to do that myself, I would come in here and I would get the average of the 3 and 4, so I would calculate a 3.5. But notice this spreadsheet calculated 3.75. You know, is that wrong? No, it's not wrong. They're just using a little bit different way of calculating that number, and that's perfectly fine. Sadly, to me, there's not one specific way to determine these different quartiles. You know, median should always be the same no matter who calculates it, but as soon as you get into the first, or oops, I said second quartile, that should be third quartile. Second quartile is the median, so there, third quartile. I've got a 3 here, so I did that right. But these quartiles, they may be off a little bit from what I might calculate by hand. Same thing down here. You know, I would want the median of these numbers. Well, if I were to do that, I'd go here to the middle two, the 8 and the 9, and I'd take their average, and I'd get 8.5. They have 8.25. So they're just using a slightly different formula. If I had 1,000 numbers, it really wouldn't make much difference. But with just a few, it can make a little bit of a difference. It's not a huge difference, but a little bit. And then now interquartile range, I don't know of a spreadsheet function that just does that. And so the interquartile range is just the third quartile minus the first quartile. So one could type that whole thing in, which is actually what I did. Quartile A1 to 20, quartile 3, you know, so here's the third quartile minus the first quartile. So that's how we know what the quartile is. There's a comma in here between the numbers, the range of numbers I'm doing this with, and then there's a comma 1 to say first quartile, comma 3 to say third. Now another thing I could do to get that 4.5 would be simply, since I've already calculated the third and first quartile, I could say, well, take the third quartile, which is that number, minus the first quartile, which is that number, and hit enter, and I get a 4.5. So that's another perfectly fine way to get it, is once you get the two quartiles, do them separately, and then do that subtraction, or just do it all at once this way. Now what I realized I left out was you might want range sometimes, the maximum minus the min, and so we can toss in here minimum. That is equal to, and the formula is equals min, and then my range here, so I go from A1 to A20, and I hit enter. And then my maximum equals, and same sort of thing, equals max, and all my numbers, and that's 10. And then my range, that's equal to the maximum minus the minimum. So, you know, again, I could just do that. I could say equals max, highlight all those, and if I didn't find it separately, you know, this is what I would have to do, and then min, and do all those, and hit enter, and I get my 10 minus 2. Or, you know, if I knew I was doing the maximum min anyway, I might just take equals and then say take that maximum minus that minimum and hit enter. So that would be fine. Whoops, cancel, backspace. Okay, so now I'm gonna go in here, the way I, whoops, I need to hit enter. The way I got these formulas to show here is I did a apostrophe and then put the command, and if you put an apostrophe before anything, it makes it a literal text, and so it doesn't get rid of it. Now, why don't you see that apostrophe? Then I was tricky and I highlighted the apostrophe here, and I went up here and I made it white, so now you can't see it. And you know, so similarly I can do that here, and you know, so there's my apostrophe, and I paste, and similarly, you know, apostrophe here, and I'll paste that again, and then I'll just write out minus min A1 colon A20, like that, hit enter. It's neat that they're blue. I guess I think I typed these before, but again, so you know, these actually all have that apostrophe ahead of the equal sign. It was just to make it look a little better for you on the video, and so there we go. Make that all right, and there are our formulas. And if I had realized before that copying it the certain way I got that blue, I'd have probably done that for all of them. But anyway, there are the formulas, you know, all right there, and you can try, you know, typing in this exact same set of numbers from the video, try the formulas and see if you get the same answers as me. The only thing I would say is don't worry greatly if in here for first quartile, third quartile, and then interquartile range, if you get like 3.5 and 8.5 instead of 3.75 and 8.25, don't worry about it. And of course, if you get 8.5 and 3.5, this will be a 5. But yeah, as long as you're getting very similar numbers, you're probably typing everything in correctly. All right, so there we go, and that's a video on using a spreadsheet to do the statistical, whatever now I'm blanking out on a word. The descriptive statistics. There we go. The class is inferential statistics, but we need some descriptive statistics to help us out. So there we go. Okay, finally. Phew. And we finished.